Twinkle Star Dance podcast, Erin.
Thank
We're so
you.
excited to have you today. We chatted a little bit before we got started, but
Mhm.
share maybe your early dance journey. What first inspired you to dance? And maybe go back to that. And how
Oh,
did that
goodness.
shape your path growing up?
Oh, what inspired me to dance is that my mom was a dance teacher. I was in her womb and she taught. She talks about how she was on the floor doing the splits and stretching, and I was in her belly. So I think I came out ready to go. The dance studio was attached to my parents' home, and I lived in there because I wanted to. I loved dancing all the time. I pushed myself. I was this self-driven child, turned into a teenager, turned into an adult. And that's where my love of dance was. It was just, I loved it. My mom, I don't know if there's anybody out there who's going to know what the solid gold dancers are.
I do.
My mom, she would watch Solid Gold and the dancers would come out. Well, here I am, like, and of course, it was a little risque, they're crawling, across the set of the stage. Who was crawling on the floor trying to mimic the dancers? I was. But like when the Rockettes would be on television, I was
Mhm.
glued to the tube. I would watch, and I actually, when I was 4, said I want to do that. And I was watching the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. I
Mm.
wanted to be a Rockette, and my mom, nurtured the want and desire as much as possible. We went to Hochter's Dance Caravan growing
Mhm.
up, and we did Tremaine growing up. And so I was exposed to all of those teachers. And one in particular, Sonia Livingston,
Mhm.
was a Rockette, and she taught for Hochter Dance Caravan. And I met her and I was like, that's it. That solidified that need and want to
Mhm.
be a Rockette and professional dancer. So, as I, got into high school, I was really good in sports, but I think it was because I did dance. And so I am a huge pusher of cross training, and especially nowadays, with repetitive movement and things like that. So I think I was a great athlete because I was a great dancer, vice versa.
Mhm.
And given the choice, I said I wanted to dance because I got a lot of scholarships and things like that for track and field. But I wanted to dance, and I auditioned for Disney and Chicago because we're in Ohio. So Chicago's the closest. So I rode that Amtrak at like 4 a.m. to go to that 9 a.m. call in Chicago. And funny thing is I made it, but I was a senior in high school. And they wanted me to start right then and there. And I said, but I have to graduate. Am I just
Yeah.
naive? Oh, I can't leave school. I got to finish. I got to graduate. And little did I know, it was like, you take that job then or you don't get it. And I had no clue. I graduated, and then I eventually started dancing professionally in Pigeon Forge. And that stepping stone led to a cruise ship, then to 42nd Street, then to Rockettes, and then to Vegas, and all these beautiful people that you meet. Where do I go next? It's like one thing leads to the next, leads to the other, and my mom always supported and wanted me to go dance. As a studio owner, you see a child who loves to dance, do they stay, and teach at the studio, or do you let them go? And my gosh, my mom was like, go, 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 have your career. And from that career, I did meet my husband doing a show. And funny enough, his mom was a dance teacher up in Canada. So he had that common thing with me. And so we both were studio owner children, and fell in love. And what happens in Vegas does not stay in Vegas. We had our careers, we had our family. When we were expecting our fourth, it was, do we stay in Vegas or do we go, either to Canada or to Ohio? And at that time, it was just a very smooth and easy transition to come back to Ohio and join forces with my mom. And of course, she was thrilled. But, it's just funny how life takes you on this journey, and you end up back home and teaching. And I never saw myself as a teacher or a studio owner. So it's just, it's funny how things happen.
I love that. And I love that you shared a little bit about, you achieved something so many dancers dream of becoming a Radio City Rockette,
Mhm.
especially coming off of the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. That's one of our traditions in my family as people are cooking is watching it. And like you
Yes,
said, you see
yes.
them on TV, you embody
Mhm.
that, you set that goal for yourself. Can
Yeah.
you talk a little bit about that chapter of your life, the audition process, the experience, what you love most about being a Rockette?
Oh gosh, ugh, I get emotional. I'm not going to get emotional about this, but there is something truly incredible about being a Rockette that you say you want to do it and you see, it is hard work. The audition process, I was there, I think it was 500. It was a cattle call, really. I mean, there was 500 and they hired, I think, five of us. I was five and a half, five, 6. They were looking for somebody who was 5'6", so I couldn't believe it. It was a 2-day process. You go through the jazz audition, and then you go through the tap audition, and then you're cut, and then they say come back, and you go back the next day, and then you do more, and you're almost learning entire routines just to make the cut. And once I made it, oh my Lord, I didn't even. It's like one of those out of body experiences when you get that phone call, and I will never forget it. Getting that phone call, and it was the two ladies. One, she used to be a Rockette, and her mother was a Rockette, and then she was in charge of the Rockettes hiring process and HR and all that. And her excitement to tell you made it. It was just came from a place where she probably remembers herself getting that. You made it. It is, you have no clue what you're getting yourself into. You have a little a notepad and pencil, and you're like, why am I getting this? The stage is itself like you've got the wood in the front, and you've got all your number lineups, and then you've got the dotted line, and then you've got there's 3 elevators, and on each elevator are solid dotted lines. Like, it is, I don't even know how to describe it, but you're learning the choreography, and they're saying you're dotted red, first elevator, 19 stage left. And you're like, what language are you speaking? And I will never forget coming home after my first rehearsal, and I just walked through the door, and at the time LJ was in Wicked. My husband was in Wicked at the time, and I just started crying. I'm like, I don't even know what happened. I have no clue what's going on. I don't even know if I retained all that. And then there's, getting sized and all the things. But once you get through 1 week of rehearsal, you soon understand what's going on. But I went through that rehearsal process. There's ladies who have been on the line. I have so many near and dear friends that, the gal that was standing next to me, she had already been on the line for 15 years. And when you're standing next to her, they give you a little bit of grace, but they expect you to be professional, know what you're doing. It's a privilege to be a part of this. And so there's so much of that feeling that it's a legacy. You learn really quick that you are a part of this legacy, and then all of a sudden you realize you're a part of this sisterhood, because once you start doing the shows and things like that, you're the camaraderie amongst all of us over the years, because the cast change. But it's just an incredible sisterhood. So this past reunion, of 100 years of Radio City Rockettes, it was an honor to meet one of the Rockettes who she was 95. And the stories, I can't even all the stories that they have. I thought my audition process and my getting put into the show process was rough. They were told you're hired, and then they watched the show from the wings, and you got a 15-minute put in rehearsal. That was it.
Wow.
Yeah, I thought, how in the world do you get 15 minutes to know where you're going? And back in the day, as they say, it was a little bit more like, what do you got, kid? And you better be good. And they just talk, it's just incredible. I could go on and on and on about it, but my experience as a Rockette was incredible. I never felt so special to be a part of something as I did with that moment. I mean, as a child, you wanted to be that. And it truly lived up to its expectations that I had to be that. And, to see the women now is incredible, and they're fabulous.
What a great story. That's so fun to hear. And I told you my friend Ashley was at Rockette. She
Yes.
called me and said, this is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. Like, it looks easy because looks simple, but wow. So
Yeah.
I'm sure your brain has extraordinary architecture to it now. Like, they say with like dance, it's the choreography, but it's really the staging.
Oh,
So
yeah.
all the Rockettes have supercharged brain architecture. But I want to ask you, so probably was a pretty big transition to go from Rockettes and, like you said, other various performing to come back and
Yes.
work at your mom's studio or take it over. So what was that transition like for you emotionally? And then the other thing is like, what do you think you brought with you? And probably this is evolving. I'm
Yeah.
certain that this is evolving over time as a dance studio owner and as a teacher, because you pull things right from like, okay, this part, but then you look at it from a 360-degree view and think,
Yeah.
okay, maybe I can soften this or make this more, maybe more expectations here. But talk a little bit about the transition then, and also right now, where you're at as far as taking those lessons from professional dance into studio ownership and teaching.
So the transition was, there's a couple parts to it. It was hard. I'm not going to lie. It was very hard because we went from living in Las Vegas or lived in New York, and you have the city life. And where I'm from, we have our communities 3,000. That's it. We are an hour and a half away from, Columbus, an hour from Dayton. So we are cows and cornfields. When I left, I knew I wanted more. When I came back, I knew I was going to be grounding my kids. I knew there's going to be great education for them. So the transition was more so for them, which I think any parent, you do what's right for your kids. And that's what we truly moved back here for them, raising children in Las Vegas. No offense. I still have a brother who lives there and has 2 kids. It wasn't something we wanted. So moving back here, we definitely did that for them. Now, what that did for me is I didn't really think about how I wanted things to happen or how is this going to be for me. I just knew I wanted to help my mom. And that's really, truly what it was. At first, I was helping. And she was like, this is wonderful. She's got 2 professionals that are now teaching at the studio. And for us, it was very, okay, all right, so we're here. How are we processing what we're doing? I mean, let's face it, you have parents are like, okay, you've got, she's coming back and LJ's coming back as well. And, what's going to change? Things going to change drastically at the studio, or is this going to be, fine? There was that. There was also, are we taking over? Everybody assumed that we were taking over. And for my mom, I had to be very careful because there was no bulldozing or like we're taking over. It was trying to maintain respectful boundaries of this is still her studio and we're here to help. But of course, she wanted us to do all these things. And so eventually she's going, I'm going to step back. I just don't know when. And so that transition is also a little difficult. And I think I could write a book about studio transfer from your mother, and her legacy to what you're doing and how that transition can be quite hard. Worked that out and transitioned that out. So I think where I went with the studio is that I was thinking about my kids, and I didn't want anybody to assume that because I was a professional, my husband was a professional, my kids are going to be a professional dancer. I wanted them to be able to have a little bit of a taste of dance. And if they loved it, great. I don't want to push it on them. I don't want them to feel that push. And that has worked out quite well. But that transition, I think everything became clear, like where I wanted to go with the studio. It took about 5 or 6 years. Again, my kids were young, and you're just trying to raise your kids and trying to see how this studio works. Of course, at the time, the numbers doubled. So then you're looking at the growth of the studio and how do you manage growth and how do you transition pen and paper and your tuition. It was when we moved back, the education I got was a business education, a moving education. It was a lot. It was so much that like I said, if I could write a book about it, I would. Where the studio is now and how we are running it, I feel it's not just about dance, it's about culture and how, for us, we are very, very culture based with our studio for parents and for the students. My husband is a Gallup strength coach. So all of those things that he works with big companies here in our area, he implements when we have, our company meetings. Setting expectations of a studio culture has really been my focus. Probably for the last 5 years. It's really been helpful because having studio culture be my main focus has helped me see my why when I didn't know what it was when we moved back, because there was just so much. But now knowing what my why is that harmony with our parents, harmony with our teachers, harmony with our kids. If you have, it's like a happy wife, happy life. If you have happy parents, you have a happy life, because you have happy parents, you have happy students, and you have happy teachers. And so honestly, at first it was, let's make the studio bigger. And I didn't know why. I feel like sometimes you have some cultural norms of, like we're here, like let's make the studio bigger and let's have more numbers and more, no, no, no. So for me, where we're at now is like, I know exactly what I want. I want happy families. I want happy teachers. I want happy students. I like where we're at with our numbers. We're at like 230, under that 250 mark. It's a very sweet, sweet spot. I know all of our parents. I know all of our students. And if we get too big for our britches, I don't think I would be comfortable not knowing who's walking in the door, and you would lose touch with that personal connection. I hope I answered all of that.
Yeah, no, that was great. And I hear a lot of work that was really beneficial for people listening, because a lot of times we're just on the treadmill and we don't know why. Like, but we want it to be bigger, or we want them to be very good. It's really interesting because I'm coming from a little bit similar background, coming from professional dance into owning a studio. Initially, you're like, I wanted to make the dancers good because, that was what I was doing. I was becoming a good dancer. And then over time, your ego goes, no, I don't need that anymore. I'd rather just really create a fantastic environment for human beings to flourish. And what's really amazing is that you and your husband have the gift of having done it. You've already climbed the mountain and you're like, that was great, but I don't need to prove myself through my student. I think a lot of times that's what's happening is that, and not to say that I never did that. I'm just saying that I could be aware of that. Like, oh, wait, this is their race to run. I already ran mine. But I think that's when things get out of whack. It's the equivalent of living through your children, right? So you're putting your own worth and your own hopes and dreams into this other human being. And then whatever they do, how they perform, and maybe it is the numbers of your studio, or maybe it is what they can achieve or what they can do, or how you think people see you or see your students, that becomes the goal. And you're like, okay, now we're getting off kilter because now people are getting competitive with each other. And instead of pulling that one student from the back into the front, we don't do that because we need the dance to look a certain way. But instead, what we're doing is we're stunting the growth of that student that's in the back corner, because we wanted to show something. So I hear what you're saying. And I think that's lovely and wonderful that in the last 5 years, at first you're like, okay, I'm helping. All right, what is this really? and I do think we evolve, and you have evolved. And I love that you're doing this strengths-based coaching. I have a master's degree in positive psychology, so I know all about that, and being able to put that in to the culture of your meetings. And what I've realized, and that you might agree with this maybe, is that people don't really seek out things like strengths-based coaching and positive psychology findings and things. They don't think they need it. It just seems like fluff. So you kind of have to sneak it in like vegetables. You don't tell them, oh, come and learn this stuff. You just say, come and learn something, or we're going to have a meeting, or whatever. You just sneak it in. It just becomes a part of the fabric. That's what I'm learning in this process of what people think they need and what they're actually going to get. That's really great. And it really does have to start with the parents. And if for me, I'm seeing that if the kids are feeling like what they're doing in class has a bigger, like you can kind of pull things in for them that's, we're here for these reasons versus just this reason of doing triple turn or whatever. When they leave, they're much more fulfilled and happy. Then they tell their parents, oh my God, that was the best thing I've ever done. And then the parents are happy. So we could go on and on probably about all the strengths-based coaching, and that'll be our next thing. I would like to know a little bit about your experience with Twinkle Star Dance, but tell me about how that's working at your studio and how that's changed since you guys have had the program.
Going way back, I think it was 10 years ago when we started, I heard Paul on a podcast, and it really resonated with me and connected with me on the whole theory, how Twinkle Star Dance works. It's a curriculum that is not just weighing on you. You are teaching teachers. They have video. They've got everything that's needed so that it's not on you. And that was my whole thing. It really, really connected with me to have the curriculum. Once we went to, I think it was New Orleans, was the conference that we went to. It just, I mean, for me, I'm like, this is just, it's a no-brainer. At that point, we had the curriculum, we had the structure, we had two of our teachers were Twinkle Star teachers. They loved it. They loved that they knew what to expect. They knew how their month was going to run. If they had to sub for somebody else, they knew what was going on. It was just the curriculum itself is that common thread that keeps consistency amongst classes. And I can't stress that enough because kiddos these days don't like change. And for example, if you have to have that sub and that sub comes in and they know exactly what's going on and they can leave off where the other teacher ended and they can start and run that class, it is smooth and kids appreciate that consistency for their classes instead of, oh my gosh, my teacher, especially when you're dealing with preschoolers.
Yes.
It can create some chaos. It calms the chaos or it contains the chaos when you have preschoolers and you have somebody who maybe they're not a parent. Maybe you have a older teenager or a young college student who is going to be teaching for you and they don't know how necessarily to connect with a little person. And you're telling them, okay, these are your classes and this is what you're doing. The curriculum itself, the notes that come with it, help provide confidence for that teacher who's never had a child of their own, how to calm them down, how to nurture them. I feel like the curriculum is perfect for anybody. And that's something that we have, from the time we started with it now. We've got teenagers, older high schoolers that are teaching the curriculum and they don't know what they would do without it because it's like, okay, I know what to expect. When they get their curriculum each month, they're like, okay, great. They feel more in charge of their classes instead of their classes being in charge of them. So I can't stress it enough how it's been fantastic. And we even use the Showstar curriculum as well. So it's great to bridge the learning from, the Twinkle babies through Twinkle 3, 4, 5, and then going into the Showstar age group and then bridging that. It's been great for us. We do have a competitive department. So it's helped our Twinkle teachers where, we do start competitive at age 5 if they want to. Those Twinkle teachers will go, well, they'd be really good as a competitive kiddo. And they know what they need to be learning to be in that competitive 5-year-old group. It just helps everybody be on the same page. There is no gap. It's just bridging into the next age group, all the way up until they're graduating. It's really been huge support for us and our teachers.
I love what you're saying about the class consistency. And you said that it helps the teacher have the confidence to be able to deliver that class versus kind of being in that fight or flight mode of like, what am I supposed to be doing with this 2-year-old? What music should I be doing? This is not working. How, like, SOS.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
But do you feel like once you did implement Twinkle Stars 10 years ago, that there were like changes in your enrollment or dancer retention or just the overall studio experience for that preschool and then now Show Stars age group as well?
I think it was nice to almost, instead of it was just like all of our students, we created a preschool department. So we were able to compartmentalize, like, this is our preschool department. And within that preschool department, we're able to have almost like our own little mini studio in itself where, they've got their, their curriculum and then we also have tumbling and things like that. I felt it boosted our numbers and it felt just more organized. I don't know. The organization was the huge part for me. And I think it gave parents a better understanding of structure instead of, they're not coming in and they're not twirling, which is I think what they thought was happening. When they would see parent observation, because we have parent observation throughout the year, they would go, oh, that's okay, wow. And so it was an eye opener for them to see their child was doing something, so
they can see the progress. And that's what I always wanted was, a lot of times you look in and go, okay, is this really worth it? They're running around with a scarf, but we do have a method, right? And we were able to show that, and we're also able to measure it. And I love what you said about you're also seeing the progress and you're seeing the transition between you're taking a 2-year-old, you look at them and you don't look at them like, oh, I'm only going to have you for a month. We never know. But you look at them like, I can see your future. But okay, so where do we start? So this is where we start. And then it should continue. And that was always my goal. So I always love hearing this, that it's working, because of course I'm going off of what I observe, or, I actually created the class while I was teaching the class, many moons ago. But it was also important to me that, you have to keep them engaged, but at the same time, if that preschool class is so different from a structure of an actual class, they might have fun doing it for a minute. But the truth is, kids like boundaries. They like structure. They like repetition, because that's what their brain needs. And then they also really like to feel like they've done it themselves. Like they overcome that challenge. If they do their healed stuff, oh, I did it. It's that progress that I wanted. And I love hearing that that's working for you as well. And maybe translating to your 5-year-old competitive kids, because not all of them are going to do that, but we do want them to be prepared for that. So that's really great. Now, you've given a lot of insight on like sort of habits and mindsets on like culture. I love what you're doing there. If a studio owner is watching this right now, what advice would you give them going through periods of transition? Like you talked about, I could write a book about maybe transitioning between, and maybe someday that'll be something my own kids will read. Jack is back from Hubbard Street teaching for me, and Hallie just graduated, and it's a lot of fun. And I'd love to be like, okay, you take it and I'll just go. I'm going to Cabo. Maybe it's not so much that. Maybe it is. I think every year we go through transitions, and maybe it doesn't. Maybe our transition doesn't just start in August, but maybe it does, because it's like we're thinking about a new year, and we evolve as human beings as we get older, we get wiser, and we see things differently. And maybe we decide we don't want to spend time doing this and we want to change it, whether it's generational or structural or philosophical. That's the word I'm looking for. What kind of general advice would you give somebody going through those transitions, or seeing something that they want to change in their studio? Should they wait till August, or is this something they should do? Oh, okay, good. I'd like to hear what you want.
No, I think I always, my biggest advice is don't be the bottleneck. Really step back and look at everything. Like, where would I be the bottleneck? From your admin to your front desk, to the communication to your teachers, to, the communication to your parents. Do what is necessary. Do I have to be a part of this? Is it necessary? Is it dire? Having said that, putting a lot of trust in your teachers and your staff, not so much a lot of trust, but training them, trusting them, knowing that you've done a lot of training without them knowing, giving them permission to make some decisions, and just knowing that it's okay. I don't have to be everything to everyone. I think as a parent, I've realized that, and I think it's transitioned into the studio as well. I can't be everything to everybody. And if I also want to be able to take a breath and go to New York for the last 10 days, and the studio still has to run, and we have a Christmas show 1 week after I got back, how does this work? Now, reverse, engineer it. I've been thinking about this for the last 5 years. How do I step out of this role? I have been stepping out of roles and thinking about how I do that. It's not just about the freedom for myself, but it's the growth for the studio. Because if I'm standing in the way, it's not going to grow. It can grow without me being, I'm not writing the newsletters anymore.
Right.
I'm not doing costumes anymore. Like, that was a big one. Doing costumes, ordering costumes. I don't teach classes anymore. It's not because I don't want to teach classes. It's because I want to step into a different role for studio growth, and being in the everyday of how the studio runs. I know now that it's like, I don't need to be there. And I don't have teachers that are looking at me going, where you at? Why aren't you here? Mm-hmm. I don't have that. They have agency to do and run things. And so I think for me, the biggest thing was, how do I not be the bottleneck for so many different things in the studio?
It's the getting out of your own way. And
Yeah.
it's just like a child. If you do everything for them, they never learn how to do themselves.
Yep.
If we're always constantly putting their shoes on, they'll never learn how to put their shoe on. They have to sort of struggle with that and get to that point. And at the same time, what you've been able to do successfully is build respect and trust with your team, so that there isn't this feeling of, I don't know, and I don't even know why this happens in a studio, but it can, and it does happen. Where you have teachers that are kind of like, they're not trustful. And then that's where the disrespect might come from. Or they're thinking, why aren't you here? You should be. And I don't know, like you said, I mean, I don't know if you've experienced that, but when you nurture them and you show them that you care about them as a human being, you want them to be a great teacher, here's all the tools for you to do that. But you said the word training, and I think that's important. So you're not just throwing things against the wall and saying, okay, do this and do that. And that's what happens when us studio owners are in it too much. If we're in a job where we can't see it from the 360-degree view, then that's probably what's going to happen. Going back to what you said at the very beginning about your why. And a lot of times if you don't have time to think about, like, stepping back a little bit to think about, what does this all mean? And the truth is, it all means something really amazing. It's just that we just have to make sure we're curating it in that way. And we're not going so fast and so big. I love what you said about 230, because knowing everyone is such a gift. And I knew everybody my first year, and then it got with multiple locations, it's just not possible. The meaning and purpose that comes back as a resonance is a lot less. And so it becomes something different. And so my last question to you before we wrap up will just be, what is it you think, like if you think about your studio within the next 3 years, what do you want to achieve? And the achievement could be anything. It could just be, flourishing and, beauty. But what do you think is like your top priority or your top goal for the studio and your families?
Well, in the next 3 years, my daughter will be graduating, and she's the last one that's in the studio out of 4 kids. I'm like, out of 3 years. Oh my goodness.
And because I've been on the other side of like having your kids at the studio, and I trained both Jack and Hallie, and Jack went on to dance professionally, and it feels very strange when they're gone. And now that he's back, so now you probably know what your mom felt, as she's going through that. But it sounds like from what you've said through the conversation, that the goal is to just create this very positive culture and environment at your studio.
Yeah.
Something, to me, I get warm, friendly, nurturing. The word culture can kind of just become, it's like this buzzword versus like, how does it feel when you walk in the door? Does it feel like a home away from home for the kids and for the parents? And so it sounds like to me that's what you have, Boyd Dance Studios.
I want them to feel like they're a part of something without really knowing that I'm a part of something. I just, when they walk in, I want it to feel like home. I think we are achieving that. We had recital in June, and we took 1 week off, and we had classes during the summer, and the kids that came back, they're like, I've been gone too long. When I heard that, obviously I'm remembering that and it felt so good to hear that. But I was like, really? You were only off a week. I know, it's just too long. And you're like, okay, I'm doing something right. I'm doing something right.
Isn't that wonderful?
Yeah.
You are doing something right. And thank you so much for spending your time with us today and sharing your story and, all of the amazing things you did as a professional dancer. And then you've taken all of that, you and your husband as a great team, and poured it into your community there. And for a community of 3,000, and you have 200 and something kids, it's like everyone's dancing at Boyd Dance Studios. That is amazing. So Erin, thank you so much for sharing. Before we wrap up, where can listeners find out or connect with you? Where can they connect with you online or on social media if somebody wants to reach out and have a question?
If they've got a question, you can reach out to director@boyddancestudios.com. That goes straight to me. And I love helping. I love reaching, when you reach out and you got questions, I will always answer. We're online, boyddancestudios.com. Facebook, same thing. Instagram, boyddancestudios.com. So.
All right. Thank you, Erin, so much. Thanks, Amanda.
Yes, you're welcome.
You have great holiday shows and rehearsals.
Thank you.
You look very relaxed and ready to go into the weekend. So we wish you all the best.